you've probably seen these edits on Instagram in some type of form. And since I myself created a lot of them, I want to try to teach you guys the techniques and After Effects I use to create these visuals. So let's go over the most viral video I ever created. In the first tutorial, I showed you how I created this shot. So if you haven't seen that yet, go onto my channel and watch that first. But now I want to show you how I created the other scenes for the complete reel. So this is part 2, where I'll be showing you how to create these 2 next shots. And then in the next and last tutorial, I'll show you how I created the last scene. All the assets and plugins you'll need for this tutorial are in the description, so go check it out firstly, and then let's start creating. Okay, so here we got the 2 scenes in After Effects. This is the whole project file I created the whole reel inside of, but we're just going to focus on this shot right here, and then of course this one. And in the next tutorial we're going to go over the last shot, which probably was the most technical, hardest shot to pull off. And also in this tutorial I'm not just doing a breakdown, I'm going to recreate the whole shot here. So we're just gonna create a new composition with the same length, and then we're going to start over. Okay, so I just created a new sequence here, and we're just going to delete that rotor brush here. But again, we can see this is the footage we're using. And of course, the first thing that we're going to do is cut out ourselves again. We don't need the background, so we don't need to duplicate it, because we just need the foreground, which is me, and we don't need the background. So we're just going to press Option W and then double click on the footage, and then just mark this pretty roughly, and After Effects is going to do the rest of the job. And make sure to go to full resolution to get the best results of the rotor brush tool. And then we're just going to mark everything so we don't miss out on any parts. And then once we're happy with the result, we can just hit play, and then After Effects will do the rest of the frames. And every time again, if there's something you need to fix, you can just pause and then fix it. But I think this is looking fine, so I think we could just go ahead and freeze it, and then After Effects will apply the cutouts to the footage so nothing can be changed later on. So once that is done, we have the final footage here with the cutout, and now I can just tweak the settings. I'll take the feather to about 30, then the contrast to 70, and then the shadow reduce to 40, I think. And now we can work with that, and I'm not going to recreate the scene one-on-one perfectly. I'm just going to create the same shot but in our own way, because it's impossible to create the same shot exactly twice. So first of all, we need a paper background, and for that I have linked some backgrounds again in the description below, but I think I'll just take this one. And if it's in a bigger scale, you just want to scale it down, then put it below the layer. We can just name it here again, just name it me, and then this paper background. And when it's not fitting the length, you can just duplicate it and make it fit, and then pre-compose and name it of course again. So now we've got that, and we can see the camera is moving inwards. So what we're gonna do to have the paper move with it, we're going to create a keyframe for the position and scale and move them to the beginning, and then here in the end we can just scale it up a bit and see where the camera is going to match the movement. I'm not really sure if this fits, but this is maybe a bit too much of the scale, so we just take it back a bit, and I think this should be fine. So the first thing that I did was I created these red dots on the eyes, which you can see here on the final shots. There's like some glitch going on inside of the eyes, so we're just going to create that real quick. So I'm just gonna pre-compose and just call it me pre-comp, and then go inside here and just, bro, my face is mirrored, that looks so weird. I have the most asymmetrical face ever. Okay, so we're just going to take out where the shot starts and then where it ends, and then mark the length of the composition here in the pre-comp. And when you pre-compose this shot, you want to press the first option to leave all attributes in this shot. So now we have this length, nothing should change here. So now what we're gonna do is you can just create a cut here to make it easier to know where to start and end, and then we are going to duplicate it twice and then cut out the eye for each of the layer. So just press Option W again and then use the rotor brush to again cut out the eyes here. And if you don't blink in your footage, it should be pretty easy, and the first selection should be enough. So this looks decent. We're just gonna hit freeze, and then once we have that, we can see the eye is isolated now. And then we're gonna do that for the second layer. We just duplicate it as well, which is for the other eye, and we just select it here, and I'll just hit freeze and trust After Effects that it didn't mess up the cutout. And now here we have the two eyes isolated. We can just call this one eye left and eye right. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna find some free glitch layers where you can set on top. So I'll just go to pexels.com and then search for glitch. And here they have a lot of free options, and this is a great website you can use if you don't want to pay for any footage libraries. And here I'm just going to search for one that fits. I think this is pretty decent, and we're just going to download it and then import this to our project. Once we have that imported, we can fit it to the scale of the composition, and then I think I like to change the color, so we're just gonna hit tint and keep it bright, set an exposure. So just wanna tweak the colors here. I just added the tint effect and set it to a red, and just bumped up the exposure a bit as well. So what we're gonna do now is set the track matte to eye left for the first one, and then we can just set this here to screen, I think. And now we can see we have this glitch on top of the eye. So we're just going to duplicate that and add that to the eye right as well. And here we can offset the timing a bit, and you can just scale these layers down, fitting the eye so you get more detail. In the eyes, you just need to make sure it doesn't clip out if the camera moves too much. So we're just going to drag this roughly to the eye. And then this one, I'll do the same thing. Hit P on the keyboard for the position, and then press the keyframe icon, and then just create about 2 keyframes. So here we can see the result, and I think this looks pretty decent. So we're just going to keep it like that. And now here we can see we also have the glitch eyes here on the final layer. One thing we could probably add is a bit of blur because it's pretty sharp. So we're just gonna add camera lens blur and set this to about 7, I think. Or I'll keep this at 5. And also what you can do is take the feather up to about 20 so you don't get that hard edge. And then I'll maybe take the shift edge up to about 5% or 10. Yeah, so we get a better edge here on the eye. This is without these settings and this is with, so I think that looks a lot better. I'll just keep this at 10 as well. So this looks a bit cleaner. So now what we're gonna add is another paper texture, which you also can find on Pexels. I'm just gonna use the ones I already have. So I'll just take this one here and scale it down, duplicate it again so it fits the length of the sequence, and then pre-compose this and call it paper texture me, so you know which one is which. And then just set the track matte to the layer, which is me here, so we only have the paper inside of the shape. And then we're going to set it to soft light, so get this soft paper texture on top of me. Which we also can do is set it to hard light, but this is a bit too rough, I think. But you can just set it to soft light or to hard light and then take the opacity down if it's not enough. But I think soft light is good for this case. So what we're gonna do is change the colors a bit. I'm just gonna add a lumetri color here and then take out the blacks so it looks a bit weaker, the image, and doesn't have the strong colors. Just take the saturation to 90 and faded film to about 40. This looks already more like paper. And the main effect of this shot, of course, is the ink filling up the screen. So I also have an asset for that actually, but I'll try to link some free ones in the description below because I paid for these ones. And here you can see I have some different options that just cover up the screen from different directions, but I think I'm just gonna use this one. And then we can just match the timing. So once the shot is finished, we want the whole face covered up, so we can just go to the end and see how much the ink has proceeded. So I think the eyes should be the last thing to be covered up, and this fits pretty well. So this is the setup for the bottom layer, and we're just going to duplicate this one and rotate it by 90 degrees, and then we can just frame it here so it matches as well. We can just take that a bit further below. And now we can also pre-compose the ink layers and call it ink. And of course set the track matte to me. And now we can say we have that covering up my face. So this effect is pretty simple. That's actually mostly it already. And now some other details I added in the background is the paper again, which is just a paper folding out. I'll just take this texture here, adjust the scale again, and then duplicate it to fit the length. Then take this below the layer of myself, and then we're going to create a shape here. So we're just going to go up to the masking tool, which is up here. We can just press Q on the keyboard and make sure it's a rectangle. So the first option here. And once we have that mask, we can go to the effects and type in stroke. Then set the stroke to a value we like. I think something around 10, 11 maybe will be good for this case. And then add the roughen edges. So these are the two effects again, like in the last tutorial, which I used most often for these videos. Just play around with the settings. We just want to have a paper edge that looks good to you. We are going to animate the evolution of the roughen edges effect and just change that for every 5th frame. I think should be enough here. So just go out here and just change it to a complete random value. You don't even need to see what the results are. You just want to change it up, and once you have the half done, you can select them all, then go 5 frames further and then paste them again. Then you want to mark all of them, then right click and press toggle hold keyframes so they only change every 5th frame and there's no animation in between. So once you're happy with that, we can go forward to animating this mask. So we're just going to press M twice on our keyboard, then set a keyframe for mask path, and then again go maybe back every 4th or 3rd frame. I'm just doing every 3rd here, and then just animate the position or the length of the mask. So we're just going to double click on it and then change the scale here. So you can't really see it in the 1st frame, so it comes in as an animation. And now we can just preview that. That looks pretty cool. But it's a bit too clean, I think. So what you can do is go to the individual keyframes and then just create some random more keys here so the shape isn't as perfect and looks more like ripped paper. And then once we're happy with that, we should get something looking quite decent, like paper stop motion animation. And this is pretty cool looking, I think. And now what we can do is change the color of this to make it stand out more from the background paper texture. So we're just going to add an exposure, and I want to make this a bit more white, so just gonna crank that up. And now something I had for the flare of the shot, as you can see here, is I added some red colors getting darker in the end, and these circle animations in the background as well. So that we're going to create right now. For that, we're just going to create a new adjustment layer and then set it below everything, just above the paper background, and then I'll add a glow. You can just use the normal glow effect here, but I'm using the optical glow from Red Giant, which I also am going to link in the description below. I think it just looks a bit cleaner, as you can see here, but the After Effects built-in glow also looks decent, I think. So if you don't want to spend any money, it works as well. Then we're gonna set a mask for the adjustment layer just in the middle and then feather it out. So we're just gonna press M twice and then take the feather up by a lot, so we have that red glow in the background, maybe the expansion too of the mask. And for the circles, we're going to create some solid layers. We're just going to create one here and then make it red, the red tone you like the most, and then just pull this below everything just above the background layer again. So once we have this solid layer, we're just going to create a mask, which is a circle as well, and then just make sure it's a good shape. And then we're going to add the CC scale wipe effect, and then here you can see once we pull that up, it's creating like a circle. So we will just be animating this over again And just make the circle mask as small as it fits behind your head. So in this case, about this scale. And then it won't be visible in the beginning. So we can just set a keyframe here at 0 and then go a bit out and set it to 100. And now we can see if we isolate this frame, we have this animation. And also make sure it is centered so we get an evenly thick circle. And now if you're happy with the animation here, with the speed and everything, you can just see where the keyframe starts and then set this to the beginning and then make a cut here where it ends. And then we're just going to duplicate this as much as we want and then offset it by a few frames. You can just do it as we want here. And once we're happy with the speed, we can just select everything and then pre-compose this one to call it circles. And now we can add a paper texture to that as well, and then set the track matte to the circles, and then duplicate this one again, and then make sure to set the blend mode to hard light in this case, I think. So now we get a bit more rough texture on it. And I think I'm going to add a drop shadow as well. You can just go ahead and add some stylized effects that you like. And now I will add a posterized time so it doesn't move as fast, and just set it to 12. And I think this actually is a bit too fast, so I'm just going to change the timing up and offset this a bit more. And as a last thing I will add on the circles is a roughen edges as well. So we are just going to set this above all the other effects you may have added, and then just play around with these settings again. And I want this to be something like this, so it looks more hand-drawn and imperfect. So this is a result I'm pretty happy with. I just take down the exposure, I think it's a bit too bright. And you can see here sometimes the roughen edges is a bit too much, so it cuts off a bit of the layer. So you can just go ahead and scale up the pre-composed circles layer to fit the composition a bit better. And now we are going to jump back to the layer of myself and now create the paper edge. I forgot to do that in the beginning. So we're going to select the cutout of me, then go up to layer and select auto trace, and then set this to apply to new layer and just work area, and then hit OK. And After Effects is going to create another mask around me, so we then can apply the stroke and roughen edges effect again. Okay, so now once we have this, we can see there's a mask all around the edge throughout the whole sequence, and we can just delete the unnecessary mask we don't need. So there's one glitch here. So we just need the blue mask here, which is the outline of myself. And again, we're just going to add the stroke effect and set this to, I don't know, 20 maybe. That's too much, I think. Like 8. And then again, the roughen edges, which we can just copy from the other layer we just created, which is the paper background here, the stripe, and then copy the roughen edges with the finished animation or keyframes on them already, and then just paste it here. And now the edge should be shifting on itself. We can just adjust the other settings here. So this looks fine, and this should change every 5th frame again now. So the last thing we are missing is this box I created. So we're just going to create a shape layer, just rectangle again. Then make sure you haven't anything selected, any layer, and then we're just going to cover up the eyes here. We can just make sure this fits, and then change it to a black, maybe not completely black, and then delete the stroke. Go in here to content, then to rectangle 1, and then delete the stroke. So we just have this black box. And what I did, I also added a roughen edges effect, but I don't think that fits that well, so I'm just going to leave it without it. But then again, I'm going to make sure we have some random position animation here. So just going to make some random movement here every 3rd frame, so it doesn't move that smoothly. And we don't want this over the whole sequence. I just want this over a few parts, so we're just going to select the position keyframes and then select toggle hold keyframe. And now we have this little shape here moving. And what you can do is just add some random effects to this. I think I'm going to add a drop shadow. And you can add whatever textures you like to this. I may be adding a darker paper texture to this, but just keeping it a shape layer that is black is also pretty cool. So I'm not sure if I'm keeping this, but yeah, I guess this looks pretty cool as well. And we can just do that for this last part as well. For some frames again, just make sure it doesn't fill too much of the sequence. One last thing I did is I added some adjustment layers with some color grading and a vignette, I think. So just CC vignette, and then you can add this one here. So you add the darker edges here, as you can see in the original as well. And then in the end, this gets a lot darker. And I think I added a red tint to it as well. So you can go ahead and type tint here on the effects, then put it to something red, and then take a mask out here while not covering any of the frame. Just create a mask like this, press M twice, then invert it, and then set the feather up by a lot. So you'll get that red vignette type of effect. And now what you can do is set a keyframe for the mask expansion, then go to the end and then set this to the darkest point we want. So around at the end we want this to be pretty dark and red, and in the beginning we don't want any of it. So just gonna take it to something like this. So the red outlines and the vignette kind of comes in as the scene goes by. And before we are going to render, I'm just going to select everything we have here and then create a pre-comp. And then I'm going to apply the posterize time with a 9, I think. This just moves every second frame. And yeah, this is the recreation of the second shot of the reel. And here you can see a side-by-side comparison of the original shot and the one we just created together now. And the third shot of this reel is very simple. So I think I'm just gonna break down the shot instead of recreating the whole scene. So here in the bottom layer we have this paper texture again, which I added a wiggle expression to. You just go to the position key, Alt press on the stopwatch here. So this is just wiggle 2.14 to make this position move randomly. Then for the next layer we have this adjustment layer with an exposure effect on it. So just create a new adjustment layer, and then you are going to create a mask as I've shown you before, and then bump up the exposure, and then of course feather it. When you press M here on the keyboard, you can see the feather is to 300. If you put it to 0, it would just stay here at the circle, and now we have this glow once we put that up. So for the next layer we have the people moving around. These are just cutouts that I used in the first scene already, and this is just people I found online, like stock footage of people. So we just want to cut them out and then again add the stroke and the roughen edges effects to it and just line them up in one line. Then you pre-compose this, and then you're just going to animate the position from the first person to the last person. And of course this is not enough, so we're just going to loop it again. So you can see here this person is the first one again. So once you have that animation here from first person to last, you are going to duplicate that layer and then yeah, just have the same animation run over again. So you can see here's the cut, and here the next animation or the same layer starts over again if the length doesn't fit. So once you have that, I added the CC lens effect to give the illusion that it's moving around of the camera, since this is getting bent at the edges. So without it, it just looks like it's passing by. And with the CC lens effect, it looks like it's circling around the camera. And if we bump it up too high, you can see you get these glitches. But if it's too low, you barely see anything. So I kept this at around 200 to get this rotating look. On the layer above that, we again have a paper texture. And then I set the track matte to the layer of the people. This is without it and this is with. And then I added these boxes again, which we just created together. And then I just made sure they followed the person. And then I also just made it come in for a few frames. As you can see, I just had it twice in here, so on these two people. And then I added the adjustment layer again. I duplicated that from the other scene, which just has these red colors on the edges. And I did not animate this one, so the red just stays in. But you can of course make that as well. So as the scene progresses, the red gets brighter and takes over more of the shot. The last thing I added is this line passing through. And this is again just a shape layer. I showed this step by step also in my first tutorial video. So you're just going to create a shape here, like this, and then you will want to go into contents, then delete the fill, and then just animate the path of the stroke here from the line you just created. And so you set a keyframe for the start and the end, and then you move forward so the line progresses and then disappears again here in the end, as you can see. And that's basically it already. This is pretty simple. Probably the easiest shot out of this reel. And together with the first one we created last time, we now got this. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, make sure to tag me on Instagram if you create something with my techniques. And also you can check out my last video here, which is a short film I created using Blender and After Effects. It was a lot of work, so I would appreciate your support. And it's only 20 seconds, so just go and watch it.